This human accidentally won an alien marriage tournament and married the Emperor's daughter. But the truth of how it all began was far stranger than anyone in the galaxy could have imagined. The story starts with a man named Daniel, an ordinary human who never thought he would become the center of attention in a world filled with strange creatures, high towers of glass and light, and 1,000 different languages echoing through a place larger than any city on Earth. He was simply traveling to deliver supplies on a trade ship. But fate has a way of pushing people into storms they never planned to face. The transport ship Daniel boarded was supposed to bring him to a quiet colony where his work was needed. But something went wrong. A wrong docking gate, a confused announcement, and a current of rushing crowds carried him like a leaf in a river until he stepped through the wrong door and found himself in a place so vast and blinding that his breath caught in his throat. Above him arched ceilings like the inside of a planet itself. Golden banners hung from crystalline towers, and a deafening roar of voices shook the ground. He had walked straight into the center of the grand arena, one of the most important places in the Empire. Though he did not yet know it, the crowd stared at him. They were not human, not even close. Towering beings with horns like polished stone, warriors with scales that shimmered like oil on water, beings of shadow with glowing eyes all filled the seats in a storm of sound. And at the farthest throne sat the Emperor, his cloak flowing like liquid fire, and beside him sat his daughter Lyra, eyes sharp with curiosity. Daniel froze, every bone in his body screaming to run, but the guards had already moved. Heavy hands lifted him by the shoulders and dragged him toward the center of the arena. He shouted that there must be a mistake, that he was not meant to be here, but his words were swallowed by laughter. To the aliens, his panic only added to the show. The truth was that this was not an ordinary arena. This was the place of the marriage tournament, a trial of strength, skill, and cunning where the greatest warriors of the Empire fought for the right to stand at the side of the Emperor's daughter. It was a tradition older than the stars they sailed between, and the winner gained not only her hand, but also power and honor beyond measure. Daniel did not understand a word of the announcements echoing across the arena, but the crowd cheered as his name was suddenly recorded into the contest by mistake. To them, he was a challenger, a fool, or perhaps a mad genius from some faraway world daring to test fate. Daniel's heart hammered. He tried to protest, to explain, but no one listened. Before he knew it, a massive alien figure in heavy armor was standing across from him, ready to fight. The crowd thundered. Daniel's throat went dry. He had never been in a fight in his life beyond schoolyard scuffles, and now he was supposed to face a creature twice his size with muscles like iron and eyes filled with hunger for victory. A weapon was thrown at Daniel's feet, some kind of long metal staff humming with energy, but when he tried to lift it, the weapon nearly pulled his arms out of their sockets. The crowd roared with laughter at his weakness. The horns sounded. The armored warrior charged. Daniel's legs moved on instinct, not with bravery but with pure terror. He stumbled backward, tripped on the sand, and fell flat. The alien's blade swung through the air where his head had been just a second earlier, and the momentum carried the giant too far. The warrior tried to stop, but his massive weight and speed betrayed him. He slipped on the sand and crashed hard into the stone pillar of the arena wall, his head ringing like a bell. The crowd gasped. Silence rolled over the stadium like a wave. Then the champion collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Daniel blinked, frozen. He had not even lifted the weapon, not even thrown a punch, yet his opponent lay defeated at his feet. For a moment, the entire arena was in shock. Then a sound rose: laughter, cheers, disbelief all mixed together. The audience roared with excitement, chanting the strange name they had given Daniel, while he stood trembling, still trying to process what had just happened. He looked up and saw the Emperor frowning deeply, his expression like thunder, but Beside him, Lyra was smiling faintly, her eyes locked on him with something that felt more like curiosity than mockery. Daniel's stomach twisted. He wanted nothing more than to escape, to vanish into the shadows, but the guards had already come for him again, lifting him and guiding him to the waiting rooms beneath the arena. He tried to speak, to explain, but now no one cared about his words. To them, he was a competitor who had passed the first challenge. And whether he wanted to or not, he was now part of the marriage tournament. As he sat in the dim chamber, his mind raced. He thought of home, of the safety of Earth, of the normal life he had lost with one single mistake. He wondered how many more battles he could possibly survive when he had barely survived the first by accident. He wondered about the Emperor's glare, heavy and cold, like a blade pressed to his throat. And he wondered about Lyra, the Emperor's daughter, whose small smile had carried both mystery and warmth. He did not know why she had looked at him that way, but he knew in his gut that his story in this strange empire had only begun. And outside, in the roaring arena above, the crowd had already decided. The human was their new favorite. Some mocked, some cheered, some whispered of hidden human powers. No matter what they believed, one truth was certain: Daniel was no longer invisible. He was now the center of a storm, and the next challenge was already waiting. This human who had accidentally won the first challenge of the alien marriage tournament was now the most talked about figure in the entire arena. The name Daniel echoed through the grand halls of the Empire's Colosseum and spread across the station like fire. Every alien who had seen him stumble and survive spoke of him as if he carried a hidden secret. Some laughed at him as nothing more than a lucky fool, while others whispered that perhaps humans possessed some unknown skill that made them dangerous in ways no one understood. Daniel himself did not understand how he was still alive. He sat in the cold waiting chamber with his head in his hands, thinking of Earth and wondering if he would ever see home again. His heart pounded with every echo of the crowd above, for he knew that soon he would be forced back into the arena. When the heavy iron doors finally opened, the guards ordered him forward. Daniel tried once more to protest, saying he did not belong here and that his entry had been a mistake. But the guards only grinned with sharp teeth and pushed him along. He stepped back into the arena, and the deafening sound of the crowd shook his chest. Across from him stood his next challenger, a creature with silver skin that rippled like water and long arms tipped with blades sharper than glass. The crowd cheered the alien's name and jeered at Daniel, expecting him to be crushed in an instant. The Emperor's face remained stern and hard as stone, while beside him the Emperor's daughter, Lyra, leaned forward in her seat, her eyes following every move Daniel made. The horn sounded. Daniel panicked as the silver alien charged forward with incredible speed. He turned to run, but his foot slipped on the sand and he fell to the ground. The alien's strike missed him by inches and hit the arena floor, sending sparks flying. The crowd gasped. Daniel scrambled up and stumbled backward again, and in his panic he grabbed the weapon that had been thrown at him. He had no idea how to use it, but when he swung it wildly, it cracked against the sand, kicking up a burst of dust that blinded his opponent for a moment. The silver alien lunged blindly and struck one of the stone pillars instead of Daniel. The impact sent a shockwave through the arena, and the alien reeled back, dazed. Daniel had no plan, no skill, and no strategy. But he had something else. Fear drove him to duck, roll, and scramble out of reach every time the alien swung. Each time he moved, the alien seemed to hurt itself more. The crowd grew louder as they watched the impossible unfold. A human who had no training was lasting longer than many warriors before him. Daniel's body trembled, his heart raced, and he wanted to collapse, but survival forced him onward. And then at last, when the alien lunged again, Daniel fell by accident onto the weapon's handle, and the energy blade hummed to life. The silver warrior tripped on the sand and fell straight into the glowing end of the staff, knocking himself out cold. Silence fell. Daniel stood shaking the weapon in his hands, staring at the unconscious challenger. He had won again, though, not by skill but by the strange dance of fear and luck that followed him. Then came the roar of the audience. Some shouted in joy, some in rage, some in disbelief. To them the human was no longer a simple mistake. He was a mystery. How could such a fragile being defeat champions without even trying? The Emperor's glare grew darker, his suspicion clear, while Lyra's smile grew softer. Her curiosity shining through. Daniel was pulled back into the chambers again. This time the guards whispered among themselves, looking at him with wide eyes, as if he carried some hidden power. One even asked in a hushed tone if all humans were like him. Daniel shook his head, saying no, saying he was just unlucky to be here. But his words carried little weight. The story had already grown beyond him. When the next day came, the tournament continued. Daniel faced another alien, this one with wings like a bat and claws like knives. Again, by nothing but mistakes, Daniel survived. When he ducked to catch his breath, the alien's wings tangled on a pillar. When Daniel stumbled forward by accident, his shoulder struck the alien in the chest, sending it crashing to the ground. The crowd lost its mind. Some began chanting his name as though he were a legend, while others spat in anger, calling him a fraud. Still, the truth was simple. Daniel kept winning. Through all of this, Lyra never took her eyes off him. In the quiet moments when the crowd roared, Daniel would glance up and catch her gaze. There was no cruelty in her eyes, only curiosity and something else he could not name. He wondered why she would even look at him when he was clearly a fool lost in the wrong place. Yet every time he saw her faint smile, something inside him felt lighter. But not everyone was pleased. In the shadows of the Emperor's court, noble families whispered of conspiracy. They said Earth must have sent Daniel on purpose to steal the throne through marriage. They said no creature could be so lucky without some hidden design. Rumors spread faster than fire through dry wood, and the Emperor's anger grew with them. He watched Daniel with a gaze sharp enough to cut, and Daniel could feel the weight of that stare pressing against his chest, even when he was far from the throne. By the end of the second day, Daniel had done the impossible. He had reached the final round. The announcement shook the entire station. A human was in the finals of the sacred marriage tournament. Crowds gathered not only in the arena but across the empire, watching through giant screens. Some cheered for him as an underdog hero. Others demanded he be removed. But the law of the tournament was older than all of them, and none could break it, not even the Emperor. Daniel sat alone in the chamber, his hands shaking, his body aching with exhaustion. He thought of Earth again, and of how small and safe it suddenly seemed compared to the storm. He thought of his family, and of how they would laugh at the idea of him being a warrior. He thought of Lyra, and of the strange way her eyes made him feel less alone in a galaxy that seemed eager to crush him. And he thought of the Emperor, whose anger grew colder every time Daniel survived. When the guards came for him, at last he knew there was no escape. Tomorrow he would face the final champion, the strongest of them all. And if by some impossible miracle he survived, he would be bound by law to marry the Emperor's daughter. His heart pounded with fear and confusion as he lay down on the cold stone floor and tried to sleep. Outside, the crowd chanted his name over and over, shaking the walls of the chamber like thunder. Daniel closed his eyes and wished it was all just a dream, but deep down he knew the truth. His story was only just beginning, and the storm was far from over. This human who had stumbled into the alien marriage tournament was now standing at the very edge of destiny. Against all odds, Daniel had survived the earlier battles and reached the final round. The crowd no longer saw him as just an accident, but as a figure who carried mystery and danger. Some called him the luckiest creature in the galaxy, while others whispered that humans must have secret powers hidden under their fragile appearance. But no voice was louder or more dangerous than that of the emperor himself. The ruler of the empire sat upon his throne with fury in his eyes, watching every move Daniel made. To the emperor, this human was not a hero, but a threat to his honor, and to the ancient tradition of the empire. Daniel could feel that rage every time his eyes met the throne. He had not asked for any of this. He had not come here to fight or to win. All he wanted was to go home. Yet here he was standing on alien soil, surrounded by creatures who would cheer his death as easily as they cheered his survival. His heart was heavy and his legs trembled, but he knew that once the final round began, there would be no way to run. Before the last fight, the emperor summoned Daniel to stand before him. The guards pushed him into the great throne hall where the air was thick with silence and shadows. Daniel bowed his head, though he did not know if it was the right gesture. The emperor's voice thundered like a storm as he demanded to know who Daniel really was. Was he a spy sent by Earth? Was he a hidden assassin sent to claim the empire through marriage? Daniel's voice shook as he explained again and again that it was all a mistake, that he had not even meant to join the tournament, that his victories were nothing but accidents. The nobles laughed at his words, calling him a liar and a trickster, but one voice cut through their noise. It was Lyra, the emperor's daughter. She stepped forward, her gown flowing like water and her eyes steady on Daniel. She told her father that perhaps destiny had guided this strange human to them. Perhaps the universe itself had chosen him in ways no one could yet understand. The nobles murmured with unease. The emperor's face darkened, but he did not strike her down. Instead, he ordered Daniel to prove himself once more in the final round. If he survived, then the law of the empire would bind him to Lyra, and no one, not even the emperor, could deny it. If he failed, he would die before the eyes of the galaxy, and Earth would be forgotten as nothing more than a weak world that dared to send one of its own into their sacred games. Daniel was taken back to the arena where the final battle waited. The champion stood tall and terrible, a warrior known across the stars for strength and victory. His armor was carved with the marks of 100 battles, and his voice rumbled like thunder when he raised his blade. The crowd screamed his name, their cheers shaking the walls of the arena. Daniel's body felt like ice, his hands cold and unsteady. He thought of Earth again, thought of quiet mornings in skies filled with blue. He wondered if he would ever see them again. He thought of his family, his friends, and all the simple days that felt so far away now. The horn sounded, and the champion charged. Daniel barely moved in time, the blade cutting the air where his head had been. He stumbled backward, tripping over the sand once more. The crowd laughed, but then gasped as Daniel rolled away, just in time to avoid another strike. Every second was terror, every breath was pain. The champion swung again and again, and Daniel's survival was nothing but instinct and chance. He ducked at the last moment, he fell when he should have stood, he scrambled when he should have frozen. Every mistake saved his life. The battle dragged on longer than anyone expected. The crowd began to murmur in disbelief. The emperor clenched his fists. Lyra leaned forward, her heart pounding. And Daniel, though terrified, felt something strange growing inside him. For the first time he realized that even though he was afraid, even though he had no skill, he was still alive. Every breath was proof that he had not given up. Every stumble was proof that he still refused to die. At last the champion grew impatient. With a roar he raised his massive weapon and swung with all his strength. Daniel flinched and fell flat on his stomach. The weapon missed and slammed into the arena floor with such force that the ground cracked. The shock traveled up the champion's arms and the weapon flew from his grip. The crowd gasped as the warrior staggered, his balance broken. In desperation he charged at Daniel barehanded, but in his fury he miscalculated. His foot struck the broken stone and he lost his balance. His giant body crashed to the ground, his head striking the pillar with a sickening sound. Silence spread. through the arena like a wave. The champion did not rise. Daniel slowly pushed himself to his knees, staring in disbelief. He had not struck the final blow. He had not even fought with strength or skill. Yet the champion was defeated, lying motionless in the sand. Then came the roar of the crowd, greater than any before. Some cheered in wild joy, some screamed in outrage, but all of them knew the truth. The human had won the tournament. The emperor rose from his throne, his eyes burning like fire. His honor and his empire's law bound him to the result, yet his heart filled with fury. He wanted to strike Daniel down where he stood, but tradition was older than his rage. The nobles shouted, the crowd roared, and the galaxy watched. And in the middle of it all, Daniel stood trembling with fear and confusion, unable to believe what had just happened. Lyra's voice rang out clear and strong. She declared that the human had earned his place, that the law was absolute, and that she would honor the tradition. Her words silenced the court for a moment, and even the emperor could not ignore them. His jaw tightened, his hands clenched, but he said nothing more. Daniel's heart sank. He had not come to win. He had not come to marry anyone, least of all the daughter of an alien emperor. Yet the path was set and the storm was pulling him deeper. He thought of the kindness in Lyra's eyes and of the cruelty in her father's glare. He thought of the whispers of nobles who already saw him as an enemy. He thought of the galaxy that now looked at him not as a traveler, but as the man who had beaten their greatest warriors. That night Daniel could not sleep. His body ached, his mind spun, and fear ate at his chest. Tomorrow would not be another battle in the arena, but something far more dangerous. Tomorrow he would face a different kind of trial, the weight of tradition, the force of politics, and the truth of being bound to the emperor's daughter. He did not know if he would survive this part of the story. He only knew that the eyes of the entire empire were fixed on him, and that every step he took now could change his fate forever. This human who had stumbled through the alien marriage tournament now stood at the edge of a fate stranger than death. Daniel had not just survived the battles, he had won them all, and by the unbreakable law of the empire, he was now promised to the emperor's daughter. The crowd still echoed with his name, half in mockery and half in awe, for they had never seen such madness in their lives. A weak, fragile man of Earth had defeated warriors from across the stars, not with strength but with accidents and desperate survival. And now, before the entire galaxy, he was to become bound to Lyra, the daughter of the Emperor, whose fury burned like fire. The Emperor's wrath filled the air. Though he spoke few words, his honor chained him to tradition, but every glance he gave Daniel was sharp enough to cut steel. To him this marriage was poison, a human intruder forced into his royal family by rules older than his crown. He could not kill Daniel without shattering the empire's ancient law, but he could wait, he could watch, and he could strike when the moment was right. Daniel knew this. He felt the danger in every shadow, every whisper in the court halls. Preparations for the wedding began. Towers of crystal were lit with golden fire. Banners stretched across the skies of the station, and nobles from every corner of the empire arrived in glittering ships to witness the strange union. Daniel was given garments he did not understand, robes too heavy for his shoulders, and was told he would be treated as royalty now. Yet in his heart, he felt no honor. He felt only fear. He walked through marble corridors with guards behind him, their eyes sharp and filled with suspicion. And he wondered if every corner held a blade waiting for his throat. At night, he lay awake, staring at the alien ceiling above his bed. He thought of Earth, of his small room, of the simple life he had lost. He thought of freedom, of choices, of laughter with friends, all gone in a single accident that had dragged him into this nightmare. His chest ached with loneliness, and he felt smaller than ever in this place of giants and fire. Yet there was one light in the storm, and that light was Lyra. She came to him in the quiet hours, not as a princess, but as a woman curious about the man she would be bound to. Her voice was calm, her eyes soft, and though Daniel felt the strangeness of their worlds, he also felt warmth when she looked at him. She told him that she admired his courage, not because he fought with skill, but because he survived when no one believed he could. She told him that in all her life surrounded by warriors and nobles, she had never seen anyone like him. Her words eased Daniel's fear, though they also twisted his heart. For he did not know if this marriage was a chain or a gift, and he did not know if she spoke as a friend or as a stranger bound by law. The days moved quickly. The nobles whispered more loudly now, their voices filled with venom. Some claimed Daniel was a trickster who would bring ruin to the empire. Others said he was a symbol of change, proof that destiny could not be controlled by power alone. The empire divided itself over his name, and in the center of it all, Daniel felt like a leaf caught in a raging river, pulled along with no control. When the day of the wedding came, the arena itself was transformed into a temple of light. Millions gathered to watch, and billions more across the stars followed through great screens. The emperor sat at the throne, his face carved from stone, his fury hidden beneath the mask of law. Lyra stood in silver robes that shimmered like starlight, her head high, her eyes steady. Daniel stood beside her, his heart racing, his legs weak, but he forced himself not to collapse. The ceremony began. Ancient words were spoken in a language Daniel did not understand. He felt the weight of every eye in the galaxy pressing against him. He wanted to shout that this was wrong, that he had never chosen this path, but the words would not come. His chest tightened, his throat burned, but then he looked at Lyra. Her gaze met his and she gave him the faintest smile, small yet real, and it gave him the strength to stand still as the vows bound them together. The crowd roared when the final words were spoken. Some cheered, others hissed, but the law was done. Daniel was now the husband of the emperor's daughter, son-in-law to the most powerful ruler in the galaxy. He felt no joy, no victory, only the weight of chains heavier than any armor. He had not won freedom. He had won a crown of fire. As the night fell and the celebrations spread across the empire, Daniel felt a deep storm rising in his chest. He walked beside Lyra in silence, surrounded by guards and nobles whose smiles hid daggers. He knew this was not the end of his struggle. It was the beginning of something even more dangerous. For in the eyes of the nobles he was a threat, in the heart of the emperor he was an insult, and in his own soul he was a man torn between fear and the strange warmth he felt when Lyra stood near. The whispers of conspiracy grew louder. Assassins were said to be preparing in the shadows. The emperor's rage burned colder with each passing hour. And Daniel, though he had survived the arena, now faced a different kind of battlefield, one filled with politics, hatred, and plots. His survival in the games had been luck, but his survival now would require something greater than luck. It would require courage he had never believed he possessed. That night as the empire celebrated, Daniel lay awake once more. He stared into the darkness and thought of what awaited him. He knew he could not run, he could not hide, and he could not return home. He was bound to Lyra, bound to the emperor's wrath, and bound to a destiny larger than himself. For the first time he realized the truth. The tournament had not been the real trial. The real trial was only just beginning. This human who had stumbled into the alien marriage tournament had now become the emperor's son-in-law. And though the law had sealed his fate, danger still surrounded him like a storm. The arena battles were over, but the true war had only begun. Daniel had survived the impossible by mistake, yet now his survival depended not on accidents, but on choices. The empire whispered in fear and anger. The nobles watched him with hate in their eyes. And the emperor himself, though bound by tradition, longed for the day when he could crush the human who had brought insult to his throne. The wedding celebrations burned bright across the empire. But beneath the light there was shadow. In secret halls and hidden chambers, assassins whispered their oaths. They would not allow a human to sit beside the emperor's daughter. To them Daniel was a weakness, a shame, and a threat. They sharpened their blades and prepared to strike. Daniel felt the weight of danger in every step. He did not sleep that night, for his heart warned him of what was coming. He had faced warriors in the arena, but this was different. In the arena there were rules, there was law, but in the dark halls of the palace there was only treachery. Still, he could not hide. He was no longer just himself. He was now bound to Lyra, and she stood in danger as well. The thought of harm reaching her made his chest burn in ways he could not explain. As the night deepened and the halls grew quiet, the attack came. Figures cloaked in black slipped past the guards with blades dripping in poison. Their footsteps were silent, their eyes filled with murder. They moved toward the chamber where Daniel and Lyra rested, certain that their mission would end quickly. But fate once again had its own design. Daniel heard the faint scrape of metal against stone. His body froze, then his instincts screamed. At him, he pulled Lyra close just as the door burst open. The assassins rushed in with weapons flashing. Daniel had no sword, no armor, no plan. Fear raced through him, yet this time he did not stumble or run. Something inside him snapped, not with terror but with determination. He would not let them touch her. He grabbed the nearest object, a heavy lamp made of crystal, and swung it with all the strength in his arms. The first assassin fell back with a broken jaw. The second lunged at Lyra, but Daniel threw himself in the way, the blade slicing across his shoulder. Pain burned through him, but he did not stop. He shoved the assassin hard, sending him crashing into the wall. The third came fast, but Daniel ducked, grabbed the fallen blade, and swung wildly. His movements were clumsy but filled with desperation, and somehow they struck true. The assassin fell, his weapon clattering to the ground. The guards finally stormed in, drawn by the sound of battle. They finished the fight, cutting down the last of the attackers. But it was Daniel who had saved Lyra's life. Daniel who had stood against death with nothing but his will. He collapsed to his knees, blood soaking his arm, his body trembling. But when he looked at Lyra and saw her safe, he felt no regret. The news spread across the empire faster than fire. The human who had won the tournament by chance had now proven himself by choice. He had faced warriors by accident, but he had faced assassins with courage. The nobles could no longer call him only a fool, for even they could not deny the truth. When the blades came in the night, it was Daniel who had stood in their path. The emperor heard of what happened, and though his heart still raged, even he could not ignore what his eyes saw. Daniel was not strong like his warriors, not skilled like his generals, but he had something the others lacked. He had resilience, he had instinct, and he had a fire in him that would not let him surrender. The emperor spoke no words of praise, but his silence carried weight. The law had bound him, but Daniel's actions had earned a sliver of respect. Lyra stood beside Daniel through it all. She told the empire that she did not see him as a mistake, but as destiny. She told them that he had shown more courage than many who had trained their whole lives for glory. Her voice rang through the halls and silenced the whispers of doubt. For the first time Daniel realized that her smile was not just kindness. It was faith. She believed in him when no one else did, and that belief gave him strength. As the days passed, the empire slowly shifted. Some still mocked him, some still hated him, but others began to see him as a symbol. He was proof that even the smallest voice could echo across the stars, proof that even weakness could become strength when the heart refused to give up. The title of husband to the emperor's daughter was no longer a curse. It was a banner of change, and Daniel carried it with trembling hands, but with a spirit that grew stronger each day. One evening he stood on the balcony of the palace, looking at the endless sea of stars. Lyra came beside him, and for a long time, they said nothing. Then she whispered that perhaps he was never meant to return to Earth. Perhaps his place had always been here, in this empire by her side. Daniel felt his chest tighten, not with fear, but with something new. He realized that the accident which had dragged him into this chaos had also given him something he never expected. It had given him purpose. It had given him love. The galaxy would never forget the story of the human who stumbled into a tournament and changed the fate of an empire. They would never forget the man who survived not by strength, but by luck, not by skill, but by will, and who proved in the end that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to stand, even when fear is strongest. That Daniel did not know what challenges awaited him in the years ahead. He knew the Emperor's eyes still watched. He knew the nobles still whispered, and he knew danger would always lurk in the shadows. But for the first time since he arrived, he did not feel like a mistake. He felt like he belonged, not because of law, not because of tradition, but because he had chosen to stand, to fight, and to live. And as Lyra's hand touched his, he finally understood the truth. Sometimes the greatest accidents are not accidents at all. Sometimes they are the first steps of destiny, the end.